to the next day after that day in the past, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just from that alone, right, you get that you get this like this day that you could not have been writing about any day prior, right? There's going to be a day that you couldn't have been writing about a prior day. And that's for
Yeah,
any arbitrary selection of day that you're writing about. It doesn't matter like how far back you want to push it. So like
yeah. The
even in a
slopes
limit
will
situation,
intersect, like
the idea
precisely
like,
will intersect twice the distance to the past. So if you're writing it today about a day 1,000 years ago, then you began writing 2,000 years.
yeah, I believe so. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, I think, but it doesn't matter. The
You get the
intersection.
idea.
So um, this situation logically entails that assuming he wasn't able to write about the future, this logically entails that the person, like the diary, might have existed infinitely, and the person also, but he had to start writing. Um, and saying that you have to be able to do it for an infinite amount of time is just saying that thing which is logically entailed that he began writing, there just must be a way to make it false. And then you arrive at a contradiction, and somehow an infinite past is problematic. Like, I
Well,
like the argument, but there is absolutely no chance he actually constructs some rigorous proof, which is always the case with these kinds of things. That they give you some situation, like the Grim Reaper argument. It has this similarity in which they give you some situation which makes you feel weird about infinities, but at the end of the day, Craig never provided any rigorous proof that there is a problem here. Um, he does the same thing with subtraction, right? So there is I don't I think it was in one of his books. Um, Craig said that infinity minus infinity can equal anything. So he had this proof that it equals 0, and then he had the proof that it equals 3. So 3 equals 0, or maybe it was 3 and 5. I don't remember. But he said that he showed that infinity minus infinity equals some number, some finite number, say 0, and then he showed that it equals some other number, let's say 5. And the conclusion is that 5 equals 0. But no, that's a false conclusion. The actual conclusion you should be concluding from that is that you cannot subtract infinities, the same way you cannot divide by 0 and expect things to go well. I see all those
yeah.
arguments as the same thing. You're assuming you can make some operation with infinity, or that some process can happen infinitely, when that is just entailed to not be true by the givens.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I get what you mean.
But yeah, I do agree. The argument is awesome. It's really
Yeah,
good.
it's definitely more interesting than the Grim Reaper and the Sniper on that point.
I think the Grim Reaper is actually pretty interesting. Also, I think that the problem is that when you get used to these arguments, then they start being less interesting.
Did I ever tell you my troll response for the Grim Reaper?
What?
Okay, so you know how Proust tries to do it with integers, basically. So basically, like the idea in the original argument is that the Grim Reapers have alarm clocks, and they each have a unique alarm clock, and there end up being like infinitely many Reapers. So like, my point was like, well, see, these alarm clocks would have to be able to use calculus. And so if the alarm clocks can use calculus, then I can also use calculus. I could just say, yeah, it's the limit as n goes to infinity. That's the Reaper that kills Fred. Yeah.
Hey, listen. I don't know. It's a response.
Oh yeah, no, that's my troll response. That's not really a good response, but obviously it's a trollish one that I like.
I want to bring up a point. Did you take discrete mathematics, like discrete math?
No, I don't think I ever had to.
It's. I know that you took engineering, and engineering they almost never take this course. This is the course. This is when I began university. On my first semester, it was on summer. I started that summer, and I took two courses. These were math courses. One is linear algebra 1, and the other is discrete math. Those are the two first courses I ever took in university, and also they were in math. Um, Discrete math is when you start learning about set theory. It's a basic course, which is the foundation of real analysis, calculus, even linear algebra, everything, right? Graph theory, it's all based on. You also learn combinatorics in this course. So like statistics and probability, it's based on that. It's a fundamental course that you take on your first semester when you start learning math. Everything is based on. And that you also learn about cardinalities and how you add them up, how you multiply, like how you can add infinite quantities to one another, how you can multiply them, and how you can take one infinite quantity and raise it to the power of another infinite quantity. So you can do that, and it's actually mathematically defined. One of the like important what's the word notes I took from this course is that subtraction of infinities is impossible. I specifically remember the professor telling us that there is no way of reasonably defining subtraction of infinities. And obviously, I tried doing it myself, critical thinking and all of that, and I couldn't. It's one of the first lessons I learned in math in university. And William Lane Craig writes papers and books about subtracting infinite quantities from one another, even though a fundamental mathematical course teaches you that it's impossible. He makes like he has PhDs and all of that, but the place in which I learned about this kind of why you can subtract, like why there is an actual reason for that. Like there is a reason you cannot subtract infinities from one another. The place in which I learned that was a first year fundamental basic course on set theory and combinatorics. How is it that this doctor professor of philosophy doesn't know it? A freshman math student can understand it easily.
Yeah, Craig is kind of a doofus when it comes to that stuff. I think that's when he started to have more math guys check his shit, you know.
Like, I want you to think about all the courses you took courses on differential equations, probably. Like, I assume.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did diff EQs and linear algebra. I think that was about as far as I really had to go for math, though. I didn't have to do set theory or category theory or any of that shit.
Yeah, it's engineering, so it's reasonable. But you should understand, maybe not about linear algebra, but everything you learn about like differential equations, it's considered more advanced than this. Do you understand what I'm telling you?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was fairly obvious to me when I saw somebody lay out that Craig had made this mistake, like why it was wrong. And I can't imagine being like a PhD publishing peer reviewed. Well, I don't know how much his stuff is actually peer reviewed, but
I don't know. Like I know he publishes arguments for God. Like it's crazy to me that you can publish these arguments in academia.
yeah, I mean, I do think a lot of his stuff gets published in stuff that's like more theologically oriented rather than philosophy oriented.
You can call it theologically oriented, but I don't care where it's published. if he brings up the Kalam cosmological argument anywhere, and it's actually published and like goes through peer review, I don't know. The place is garbage.
You know, I'm much nicer to theists these days in general, but like the fact that theology is almost considered an academic field is like really crazy when you think about it. It'd be like if like necromancy was considered an academic
I don't
field.
know, man. I just assumed that theology, like Alex O'Connor, he made it. He studied for a degree in theology. He seems to think that it's a reasonable subject, and I tend to trust his judgment. But I don't know.
Oh, dude, come on. Come on, dude.
I
He
tend
like
to
gave up
trust
on
his
being a
judgment.
vegan.
Like I don't know.
Did you
Like
wait?
he studied it.
What is? Are you a vegan?
Well, no,
If he
but
was a vegan and now he's not, so like, how do you? He's very wishy-washy, bro. You can't trust him.
I don't know. Listen, when I listened to him talk about his degree in theology in some of his videos, it seemed like he learned more about history. Like he learned a lot about the history of Christianity.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff to be learned about the history of the major religions and their doctrines and the development of their doctrines and like the letters that were written between there's a ton of information there and it's all super. I mean, if you're interested in it, I don't see anything wrong with it. I'm just saying like it is kind of funny when apologists like roll out like people who have studied theology as like experts on whether or not God actually exists or not, you know? Because like you could study theology of like ancient religions that nobody believes in, you know?
Well, but still, when he spoke about it, it seemed like a history of Christianity degree, right? Which is not that bad. But with
Yeah, no, I mean it's not
so
bad, but I mean at the same time, like when I said like it would be like having a field of study about necromancy or like Satan, like I mean I guess maybe theologians do study things like that as well. I don't know if they study like Satanist theology.
how much of the study of theology is around apologetics? Because like apologetics is really that one thing which is a problem.
Well, I mean, I think the lines are really blurry, to be honest with you, because you have these institutions who will actually like you think about like grant money for like actual scientists, right? And like archaeologists and historians and stuff like that. But like the institutions that are funding like theology are probably like the churches, like religious organizations and that kind of thing. For the
Yeah.
most part, right? It's not that like nobody else is interested in that, but like at the same time, that's probably where most of the funding comes from. And then the articles that are published in their journals that they fund are going to be of an apologetic sort of like angle, and people often look at it like it's like they kind of arm apologists with like philosophical weaponry.
Hey,
Oh my god, it's like a weapons factory for argument. Oh no. It's
hey,
it's
Yeah, they're weapons dealers.
hey,
I
before you guys
Frank, what
continue,
up?
yeah, I'm sorry. No, I wanted to say two things. Number one, I wanted to say, name that trait, bro. And the second thing I wanted to say was, I wasn't sure what you guys were talking about before, but I started recording, so anyway. But name that trait, bro. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Oh shit!
okay. By the way,
You go first,
when did
clock.
you start
You go
recording?
first.
Like right now or like a few minutes ago?
Good job, good job, clock. You killed the room. Good job, buddy. No, I'm just saying. Frank, you should have started this recording long ago. We've been going already for
Yeah, we've
an hour
been.
and a
I'm sorry. I when
This entire time,
half. I'm
Nirvana
just
told me,
kidding.
he was like, "Hey Frank, start recording," and I'm like, "All right." And then I went to my laptop and I had to update OBS, but it's updated now, so it's like if you guys
We
wanna.
solved all of philosophy while you were doing that, and the audience missed it. They missed
we
everything.
just disproved the existence of Jesus.
Oh my gosh. Well, I got some
He
of
Like
it.
mentions it.
I got some of it.
absolutely.
I got some of it, but
Illogical, absolute.
if you guys can recap it real quick, just go through it one more time. That would be pretty cool.
There were way too many subjects that were covered.
Yeah, there were just too many.
We're just gonna have to keep going.
On another
No,
time.
that's fine. I'll be in the audience. No problem. No problem.
You will have many additional opportunities to record this. This entire thing started by like me trying to understand how do you like talk to these people. My problem with like if we go back to the situation I described to you in Strong Atheist, it's not just that I had a hard time like picking the argument. It wasn't even the main problem. Like it's also like I tried to cram up a lot of responses in a single conversation, which can't really go well. Um, but mm, the main problem was that one person was talking to another person. They had their own discussion, and when I wanted to go into that discussion and bring up my talking points, I was kind of external to the conversation. I couldn't really even be a part of the discussion in the first place because they were already talking, which is embarrassing. But it was the situation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't get a lot out of talking to certain people, but it kind of depends on the topic. I mean, I've talked to people like Darth Dawkins and actually gotten them to start talking about like more interesting things than we've already heard them say a million times in the past and that kind of thing. So, um, I don't know. Like, it depends on the person. I don't really waste a lot of time talking to um, the silliest of the people. Like, I don't really
That
have any
guy,
interest.
like he said about himself that he studied the subject and that the logic. What's the word? Common sense. No, not common sense. Translation, I think, is common sense. He that it's common sense that God exists, and that logic just um, makes it necessary. And like he is certain that he studied the subject quantum.
Yeah. Wait, are you talking about James Anderson?
No, I'm talking about the guy that trains with me.
Oh,
He
that's wicked
thinks
fun.
he studied the subject. What?
These people are so goofy. I'm gonna like force Nirvana to come up here by sheer awkwardness of my will.
Sheer
Even though he said he's busy,
awkwardness.
I'm gonna like make his recording really awkward until he comes up here.
Ron is always busy. I've noticed that about him. He's always doing something.
You know what's too bad? Like it's too bad. You remember that guy who tried to justify pedophilia the moment like he was a Muslim? He's a Muslim, and like somebody brought up the fact that Muhammad was a pedophile, and then he began justifying it. Um, before that began, I wanted to talk to him about whatever it was we were discussing, but then he was kicked out of the server, which was probably for the best. But I wanted to like destroy him with facts and logic and everything.
Hey, Sully. what was your I remember you being on Clubhouse and uh Jack Angstreich was talking about something you said. Um it was about the logical problem of evil and you had some sort of response to it. And I was just wondering what was your response to his logical problem of evil?
Um, so it's I had a response to a version of his argument that I had spoken with him about, and later on, I got like a clarification from him, let's say, about like what his argument actually is. Um, I mean, the general response that I had was that what the moral facts are is not determined by logic, right? So the idea is like it could be a good thing for God to create beings that have libertarian free will and make morally significant choices, and it could be a good thing in some cases for him not to intervene if they do something immoral, right? And then if you have like those conditions set up, then it becomes obvious that you can maintain that God doesn't do something wrong, but some agent does, right? And so evil exists, and yet God is still all good, and so on. Um, like basically, the response that I got after that was that you know if you know something is evil, then that entails an obligation that you prevent it from happening. And the whole point that I was making is that the immoral action that's done by another person, let's say, is a separate action from any sort of action that I do to prevent them from doing whatever they're doing. And it could be the case that the moral valences of those actions are like independent from each other. Like there's no logical issue with that being the case. And so it could be like that even though their action is immoral, my preventative action is also something immoral, i.e., like I shouldn't do it. Right. And it's not the case that like I'm saying that this is the common intuition about most cases of people doing immoral things. Like we obviously usually think we should intervene, right? But the idea is that like it's still logically possible that it's true that there are cases where we shouldn't or that God shouldn't. And they ended up just saying basically that they wanted to just define evil in the certain sense where if you know something is evil, there's actually an obligation on you to prevent it, and that's just built into the definition of evil. Um, but the issue is that that leads to a bunch of other kind of crazy consequences that um, I think are problematic. So, I mean, that's like a rough sketch. It was a long sort of back and forth, and I ended up like formalizing Jack's argument for him at a certain point, and I think they signed off on that. I'm not 100% sure, but I haven't really talked to him since then. So um, that's where it left off. But
All right. I uh I was wondering cuz I've been listening to Phil talk, Danny, and I thought his argumentation on uh on the logical problem of evil was actually like something I never heard before, and he formalized it very well. But I was just wondering if there was objections to it because I know people can always bring up free will as something to object to it to a certain degree. But I'm not sure. So
I have to ask, what's the distinction between the logical and evidential problems of evil? Because when I think of it, when I think of the problem of evil, I just think of one.
sorry. Yeah. So basically, the logical problem is saying that the omni characteristic, so the triomni God, right, of classical theism, is incompatible with the existence of evil, right? So the idea is like there's a logical inconsistency or a logical incompatibility between those two things, such as they can't like coexist, right? They can't co-obtain. The evidential argument is saying that the amount of evil or the degree of evil that we see in the world is not what we would expect given the existence of an all good God, right? So the idea is like the degree of evil or the kind of evil that we see or like that kind of thing, like that we actually see, is evidence against this triomni classical theist God. That's all good. So the logical problem says there's like a sort of strict incompatibility, and the evidential problem says that there's like a sort of probabilistic inference that it's unlikely, given the facts of the actual world, that there's an all good God.
Listen, that's kind of obvious from the names, but like, how do the arguments themselves differ? Like, what points
Yeah,
can
I
you
mean,
bring up to show that there is actually a logical contradiction? The evidential problem is kind of obvious, but how do you show a logical contradiction?
so I think like the typical example, or like the one that's referenced the most, is Mackey's problem of evil argument. And I'm trying to remember exactly how he formalizes it, but it's let me see if I can pull it up really.
I think that the evidential problem is enough. In real life, you don't do things by formal logic. You do things according to the evidence that you see. The fact, like the fact that you need some logical contradiction in the first place, that's the problem. You don't need there to be a logical problem of evil to say that evil is a problem for theism. You don't do it with anything else. You only do it with theism, because the standard people demand of um, on this subject is just, it's off the scales. The standard of proof you need to show something about religion is crazy. Usually evidence is enough. No, not when it's God. No, now you need a logical contradiction to exist for some reason.
Yo, I'm gonna try to do some guitar shit really quick, and I'll be right back. And Piper will come in a minute too, I think. So
Piper
we got
didn't speak to him for a long time.
yeah, Piper's awesome. But I'm gonna try to get this. I'm gonna try to see if I can lay down this like dope jam real quick, and then as long as it works, I'll come back. Well, even if it doesn't work, I'll come back. But Nirvana, you need to come up here, piece of shit.
I'm still recording. Hey, Doomsday Clock, what's up, man?
I'm gonna call Nirvana a piece of shit
Hi.
once more for the recording before I dip out, and then I'll be right back.
I guess this is my stage now. So are you theist, atheist, Doomsday, or I'm not sure.
Me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, sure. I am simping for Jesus.
Simping
No,
for
just
Jesus.
simping for Jesus. Just kidding. I'm an atheist.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
What were you guys talking about? Infinite regress?
Um, we were talking about um, Methuselah's diary, which is an argument that Quantum heard recently about why an infinite past should be impossible. We're talking about an infinite past. And by the way, I think that you need to understand, Frank, that in the field of mathematics, the existence of infinities is not controversial in the slightest. The only, like, when I heard about those kinds of arguments against infinities, I only heard them from two places, two like extremely niche kind of places. One place is religious apologetics, and the other is mathematical finitist. And like almost nobody is a mathematical finitist, and religious apologetics is like stupid. So math, actually the field of mathematics, which are actually the people that one of the main things that interest them is infinities. They don't discuss it. They just don't. Unless you're a finitist, which is again almost never happens.
So what's the argument called again? Methuselah. Um,
Um, m- uh, how did he? Yeah, Methuselah's diaries. So, I'm kind of tired, and I'm playing a chess game. Give me a minute. I can tell you. Okay, never mind. I'm gonna resign the game.
yeah,
So I'll describe
if you could lay
it
it
for
out
you.
for me, I would appreciate it. That
Fine,
way,
fine. I'll describe the argument for you. So it goes something like this. Imagine a person documenting documenting days in a diary, right? So um, everything he does, like his entire business is writing a diary. So every day he writes in his diary. The amount of time it takes that person to finish documenting one day is 2 days. So, for example, if today is Sunday, right? If the person is documenting last Sunday, it's gonna take him 2 days. So he's only gonna finish tomorrow, right? If he started today at the morning, then he's gonna document last Sunday today and in Monday. Um, on Tuesday, he's gonna start documenting last Monday, and he's gonna finish on Wednesday. On Thursday, he's gonna start documenting last Tuesday, and so on. And he's gonna finish on Friday. Do you understand?
yeah, I understand. Go, yeah, keep going.
Every day that he documents takes him 2 days to finish. Now, obviously, that means that the rate at which he documents the days, it's kind of retarded. Like, not retarded in the sense that it's stupid, but every day that passes, um, his documentation gets further by 1 day from the day which he is documenting. So, in my example, if this Sunday the person starts documenting last Sunday, then it's retarded by 7 days. And at Tuesday, where he's gonna start documenting last Monday, it's gonna be retarded by 8 days. At Thursday, it's gonna be retarded by 9 days, etc. Now, the point of the argument is, what if this person was writing the diary an infinite number of days? Then the amount of retardation, the amount of days by which the documentation is retarded, it's infinite. So the result you get is that currently he's documenting a day which happened an infinite amount of time ago. But on a real number line, the difference between any two real numbers has to be finite. If x is finite and y is finite, then x minus y has to be finite. But if this process was happening an infinite number of days, then today he has to be documenting a day which happened an infinite amount of time ago, which contradicts that mathematical fact. And that should entail, according to the logic of the argument, that an infinite past is impossible. I know I explained it like in a slightly cumbersome way, but that's the argument. My refutation to the argument is saying that this process just couldn't have happened for an infinite number of time. You can mathematically show that if the person began writing the day, if today the person documents a day 1,000,000 years ago, then you can mathematically show that he began documenting 2,000,000 years ago. So for every amount of time, which equals to the difference between the present day and the day which he's documenting, so let's call it X, right? He began documenting X days ago. He had to start writing 2 times X days ago. Saying that this process happened an infinite number of days contradicts the fact that he started writing 2x days ago. So at the premise of the argument, you already have a fallacy. You're assuming that something that has to be finite can happen for an infinite amount of time. Now, the argument is awesome, right? The argument is interesting, but it's fallacious, as all religious arguments are, usually.
What about the
So,
resurrection? What about the resurrection of Jesus Christ?
the fact I usually don't think about the resurrection of Jesus. I don't think about it quite often, so I don't know. I don't have many responses to that because where I live, nobody even mentions Jesus ever. Like the person who mentions Jesus more than anyone else is usually me because I spend time in these online circles.
I see.
Um, the resurrection of Jesus. Can you like I heard people discuss it for some amount of time. If you present it, then I can probably refute aspects of it. But when it comes to like historical details, unless it's like a logical problem with the argument, then I don't think I can spot the fallacy because I don't know the history of it.
I mean, there's a basic conceptual response to any sort of historical argument Bob wanted to make for the resurrection, or you could make for the resurrection.
Let's think for a moment.
I've heard another Jack Angstreich thing. I heard that he said something like, "It really doesn't matter whether Jesus Christ resurrected or not. That doesn't prove like God or anything because it could have been like an alien or like some sort of highly developed, creature."
I mean, that wouldn't be the argument that I'd use in response to the historical arguments. The argument that I'd use, sorry if there's like scratching noises, my cat's being annoying. The argument that I'd use would be some version of an argument given by both Ehrman and Luderman, who are New Testament scholars, which is that history, being a human science, is a naturalistic discipline. So there's no inference from history to supernatural events because by historical methods, natural explanations are always going to be the better explanations than supernatural explanations.
It's a good point. But you know what's gonna happen, right? Like correct types are gonna listen to that response and say that it's some sort of naturalistic fallacy or something.
Well, no, the naturalistic fallacy is something different. But Craig's
I know, but that's what people are gonna tell you.
Well, I mean, Craig's actual response to this, because he did debate Ehrman, Craig's actual response to this was trying to say that, well, that just amounts to like Hume's argument against miracles, but like there's clear differences between the two, so I don't think that works as a response.
Listen, the response of like granting that Jesus resurrected, I like it because it's just it shows you that even when you grant them the resurrection, they have nothing. Um, you don't really need to. You don't need to even get into all these discussions about the philosophy of science and how history like
Well, I do because I'm interested in that kind of thing. If you're
yeah,
not,
like okay, you can do that, and I don't think it's gonna be too difficult for someone like you. But you don't have to. That's the thing. You can just be lazy, which is what I do. Try to, and just say, well, assume he resurrected. Yeah, I think that starting from now, starting from today, if somebody brings up Jesus' resurrection argument to me, it's probably gonna be my go-to response. Like assuming it happened. So what are you gonna do? It's extraordinary, but
Anything you wanted to add, AA batteries?
Nah, I got nothing. And hey, what's up?
Hey, what's up, man? Hey, Piper. Sully said you're cool. I don't know you, but I've seen you on the on Clubhouse before. I usually used to hang out over there, but I don't ever talk because I'd rather just listen. So, but anyway, yeah. So he should be back soon.
nice to meet you.
Yes, sir.
Piper, what is going on? I haven't spoken to you in about in over a year.
Same old. Well, not quite same old, same old. I moved into a new house, so that's the major thing that's going on.
And the major, yeah.
What's going on with you?
Well, and third, I am gonna get back to what I really want to do in life, which is uni. I'm gonna go back to uni like a month and do some really awesome stuff. I hope.
What are you looking to study?
Same thing as the science.
Oh, so you're gonna do physics, and math and stuff?
Something like that.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm currently getting my bachelor's degree in psychology. So yeah.
Psychology is awesome. I know somebody who got a bachelor's degree in psychology, and he like I talked to him on Discord, and he constantly tells me things about like that he learned from his degree. Most people would just say that he's annoying and like stop listening. I try to not do that because if you have a person that is willing to share that kind of knowledge with you, if you don't take the opportunity, then you're sucker. That's how I view it, at least.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. And I've learned a lot about different philosophers like Sigmund Freud and Eric Erikson and Maslow and just different guys, and their theories. It's it's tough to really understand. It's like basically all about changing behavior, and that's basically what's the important part about psychology, which is what I want to do. Is like I want to get my master's degree and open up and become a therapist. So because I've
Being a
always,
therapist is really awesome.
yeah, I've always been interested in helping people and really understanding what makes people like different, and I think just having like a basis of understanding in like philosophy can help me to like bring it into that world, if that makes sense. So yeah.
I don't know, man. Like, if you wanna, you don't need to go to go through this cumbersome route. If you wanna know psychology, then just go straight into psychology.
Do you have to do the MCAT for psych? Frank, you there?
I'm sorry, can you repeat what you said?
I was asking, like, do you have to do the MCAT to get into whatever school it is for
No.
your master's in psychology? No.
No, well, I'm not sure what the steps are to get into the master's degree program. Right now, I'm in the bachelor's degree program, and all I had to do was take a test before I got into the school. The school is a private university, so
Are
it's
you American?
yes, sir. Uh huh. Yeah, I'm American.
Okay. You
Anyway,
might want to check up on that.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. If add me as a friend and give me some information. I mean, fine.
I'll look it up. See what I can find. Cause I know you do to be a doctor, and usually like it's. Uh, do you plan on going straight into uh graduate school after undergrad, or you thinking of taking a break in between?
I am right now. My plans are to like try and work in the field, maybe shadow some therapists, maybe get like a internship type job, and that way I learn more about how to treat people and gain experience before I actually get into like a master's degree program. Uh, but I'm probably gonna use the exact same school and then probably go to a different school for my PhD. So
All right, that's nice.
yeah, but if you have any information you can give me, that's fine too. Hey, Dark Master, how you doing, man?
What I really like about I know it's gonna sound weird, but one of the things that interest me most in psychology is actually mental disorders. So when you understand all the ways in which the human brain can malfunction, it gives you insight into the healthy brain and how it functions. So, like, for example, if you want to know which part of the brain is responsible for sight, and you have a person who, due to a brain injury, um, lost his sight, then just do a brain scan of that person, compare it to the brain scans you have of people who can see, spot the difference, and that's your answer. That's the part of the brain that's responsible for sight. Um, I don't know if you even have to do a brain scan. Just look at where did he get injured. That might give you information. You want to know, you have a person that doesn't see color. You spot the difference in his brain. It gives you insight into a healthy brain that sees colors. You have a person with ADHD. You want to know what allows people to focus. Then you look at people who can't focus. You just get all this kind of information from malfunctions of the brain that it's just it's amazing how it how it works.
Yeah, I do think that's interesting. Like imagine like with Phineas Gage, if we had the technology to look at like the brain, like we didn't even like we weren't capable of doing that, but yet like that's how we at least first obtained that knowledge. Like we saw he got this thing stuff up his frontal lobe, and he's acting different. So like it gave us some insight. Like surely then the frontal lobe has something to do with your emotions and your
Yeah,
complex
Phineas Gage.
thinking, and then so like now we actually get to see that. You just get a scat can, and we see that, and it answers so many things, just so much, and that's pretty amazing how we see the similarities of certain like even like emotions, like how like one emotion lights up this part of the brain, and then maybe like smoking a cigarette lights up that same side. So like, so this is why we have addiction. This is why we have uh, this sort of sexual satisfaction. This is why we have people that like this or don't like this, the opposite. That's very, very perplexing and amazing.
You know what we should do? There is a crazy, insane, absolutely mind blowing argument that atheists could use. And I will say that I feel extreme regret for not using it all these years, even though I knew about it. Um, there is this part of the brain called the corpus callosum, and it connects the right hemisphere with the left hemisphere.
Yes.
There are people who got their corpus callosum cut off, and it's possible for one hemisphere to be an atheist, while the other
Yep.
hemisphere is religious and
They call
believes
it they call it the two brains. Yes, and I've heard of that argument where I'd hear some ask like, "Hey, like, does he go to heaven or hell?" Because it's one
exactly.
person,
So
but
like,
their
does one
brain is completely
hemisphere go
split.
to heaven and the other go to hell? What
Yeah, that's
the
a
hell?
very perplexing argument, and that's just so amazing. It shows like how complex our brain is, but yet how redundant it is. I mean, our brain is such a complex machine, but yet
Like I don't know
split
if you should
through that
call it
one.
redundant, because if you cut an important part off, then yes, it's gonna malfunction, obviously.
Well,
But
the reason why I say it's redundant is because like, why does it even have to be split in the first place? Like in terms of evolution, it makes sense why it's an organ that has evolved gradually through
listen,
time.
you usually the connection doesn't get cut off, so it was never an issue.
Exactly. But in terms of like, if you look at it like a design, that's where it seems kind of like,
I don't know if it's really such a bad design, but it's not the point. The point is, if like, why don't we use that as an argument?
oh,
It's
that is a good one.
knows about it, but
I
nobody brings it
haven't
up
heard it
ever.
much though.
Hmm?
I think I've only seen that argument once or twice in
Exactly.
years. In
Why
years.
don't we use it? It's great. Like
Like maybe like you get
you
split
can actually
because
get at
your
a
soul
conclusion,
gets.
but it's gonna mess with theists' brains because they're gonna hear that argument. They could conclude that different hemispheres go to different parts. They could conclude something else. I don't know. I
Like
don't know what they're gonna conclude. But the point is, they have a view that a person's beliefs are somehow connected to his soul, and where the soul's gonna go is determined by the beliefs. But beliefs exist in the brain, so it's just at the very least, if you bring this argument up, it's gonna make them think. I don't know what conclusions people are gonna get to, but they're gonna think, which is a good thing.
is it for half of eternity you go to heaven, and for the other half you go to hell.
I, I
we gotta split the deal.
that's a good joke if you think about it, because you know how people say, if the first million is the hardest, so start from the second. The first eternity in hell is the hardest. So let me just skip it and start from the second, and just spend eternity in heaven first, and then when it ends, I'm gonna go to heaven.
I've always wondered, um, personally, about how they're probably. I mean, hell really doesn't make sense because, I mean, being punished for eternity for a finite crime, that that seems unfair to me.
Of course.
Then
And
again,
I'm pretty sure Lex Talionis. I'm pretty sure the idea of Lex Talionis dates back to the Hebrew Bible, doesn't it? I'm gonna look it up right now. I want to make sure because it says I feel like Lex Talionis derives from the Bible, and if it does, yes, here it is. Lex Talionis is a commandment found in the books of Exodus 21:23. So that doesn't really make sense to me. So Lex Talionis is the conception of the punishment must fit the crime. But yet, apparently, disbelief in God is a punishment fit for eternity in hell. I don't see how that is a punishment fit a crime. If it even is a crime, I don't see how it is.
I want to show you something. I want to read something to you. It's gonna take a while, but it's gonna take like a few minutes. Are you ready to listen? Okay. Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. It's something that I read once, and I just googled it real quick. So it's funny. It's funny. So the thermodynamics of hell. A thermodynamics professor had written a take-home exam for his graduate students. It had one question. Is hell exothermic or endothermic? Support your answer with a proof. Most of the students wrote proofs of their beliefs using Boyle's law or some variant. One student, however, wrote the following. First, we postulate that if souls exist, then they must have some mass. If they do, then a mole of souls can also have a mass. So at what rate are souls moving into hell, and at what rate are souls leaving? I think that we can safely assume that once a soul gets to hell, it will not leave. Therefore, no souls are leaving. As for souls entering hell, let's look at the different religions that exist in the world today. Some of these religions state that if you are not a member of their religion, you will go to hell. Since there are more than one of these religions and people do not belong to more than one religion, we can project that all people and all souls go to hell. So, all people. Okay, I assume that. With birth and death rates as they are, we can expect the number of souls in hell to increase exponentially. Now we look at the rate of change in volume in hell. Boyle's Boyle's law states that in order for the temperature and pressure in hell to stay the same, the ratio of the mass of souls and the volume needs to stay constant. Thus, there are two possibilities. Possibility number one. If hell is expanding at a slower rate than the rate at which souls enter hell, then the temperature and pressure in hell will increase until all hell breaks loose. Possibility number two. If hell is expanding at a rate faster than the increase of souls in hell, then the temperature and pressure will drop until hell freezes over. If we accept the postulates given to me by a young lady during my first year, it will be a cold night in hell before I sleep with you. The number two above is not true, and so hell is exothermic. Bam!
I don't think any of the goat herders who wrote about hell had any conception or ideas about anything of what you just said right now. But on a side note, there are equally as many conceptions of hell that are frozen as equally as there are of it being fire. So the whole freezing thing, I don't think would really be an issue. But
that's not the point. This student,
I know, but there's a little
chat. And like, okay, so there is a continuation to that. A response from a professor of classic at UOA, however you pronounce it, I don't know. Now, in Dante's description, upper hell has regions of intense heat / falling flame, etc., while the very bottom is in fact a frozen lake. This would suggest that while upper hell is largely static, lower hell is rapidly expanding and or accommodates fewer souls. Since the bottom contains Satan and the worst sinners, the latter explanation, fewer souls, would seem to apply. whereas simply being in the wrong religion would be accommodated above. Hence, the more intense heat. The student is clearly right. Robert Ketter.
Which region of hell can I become a spawn? Because that would be pretty awesome. Any insight on that?
That was incredible. Like it was a work of art.
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense than cattle giving birth to striped calves by looking at a striped tree.
I think part of the reason that people came up with the idea of hell or just an afterlife in general is because they have a fear of death, you know?
Oh,
And I
sure.
think
And
Oh yeah, they have a fear of death, so they were gonna talk about burning for eternity.
yeah, but the thing is, the Old Testament, there is actually never a mention of heaven or hell. Heaven was not a concept in the Old Testament. At least earlier on in it, then eventually, gradually, the concept of a heaven was added, and then after heaven, the concept of a hell. So it's interesting seeing how in the past, how societies, as they morally progressed and became much more theocratic, like, all right, now we have rulers, the mass, that are religious. We need to add this inception of a heaven. And then these empires grow, they grow and they grow. And now we need to add now this inception of a hell to presumably, keep the people in line, make sure they abide the uh, the
Listen,
God's law through the natural law. And
that's
it's
just
pretty
like
interesting.
ideas of how it might have happened. But is it even mentioned in the New Testament? I don't think so.
What, the inception of hell?
Lake of fire, but it's a lake of fire is not exactly the same as a hell.
Jesus brings up the lake of fire and the gnashing of teeth.
Yeah, like that isn't that it? Like it brings up those things, and like hell isn't really brought up. I think there was this book Dante's Inferno or something, and like it was brought up then.
I'll try to see certain Bible verses.
I think hell's mostly a Hindu concept.
I heard something
Yeah,
interesting by Bart
it
Ehrman.
obviously came from some other religion. It couldn't have been just.
Yeah, it says, yeah, but as for the cowardly, the faithless, and the detestable, their portion will be in the lake that burns of fire and sulfur, which is the second death. And then there's Matthew, which says, rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Like that, I think that's the only verse which actually explicitly has the word hell in it.
Yeah, Bart Ehrman said something about how hell was more of like a destruction of the body, and how it was more of I don't remember what you call people that don't believe that believe hell is like the destruction of the soul, but not
Yeah,
necessarily
annihilation or something.
annihilationism, right, and it's not about like eternal place or anything like that.
I don't care what they believe. It's all nonsense to begin with. And like, when are we gonna stop pretending that the next argument for God is gonna be any different?
The
Like,
trees.
I haven't been under the
they had
impression that there's
thousands
going
of
to be any.
years.
I haven't
But
been
yeah,
under the
that's a good point
impression
because
that
it
there are
does
going
say
to be. I haven't been under the impression that there are going to be any like decent arguments for God like
the trees.
anytime soon. Like, you know, my entire life basically.
Have you not seen the
So I'm
trees
not
outside?
pretending.
You clearly haven't looked outside and see the trees.
I don't know. We're sitting here and like discussing those arguments. I don't know if we should be doing that because it might be fun to like complain and everything, but why are we doing it?
I mean, the reason I engage in this stuff is one, is I want to. I mean, I want to sort of know the truth myself, and then I also want to convince other people of what I think is true.
Because it's fun. I do it because it's fun.
There is something fun about it, but you know, it gets old at some point, really old. You
The
said,
arguments get old.
yeah, of course. So Piper, you said you want to know the truth yourself. You know the truth. Obviously, religion is, and you know you want to convince other people of it. To what extent you want to invest? You know, you can go to a charity and like affect people positively that way. Do you like? Why do you actually want to convince other people? That's a question that I ask myself sometimes, and truly, I am not sure why. I just want to do it.
Well, I think people can make better decisions if they know the truth.
Yeah, and it frees them of like restraints. You're pretty like restrained in religion. Like you have to feel like you have to hide your sexuality. You have to like feel like you have to hide certain thoughts and all that. Like
Yeah.
it's very restraining. Like like I gotta be careful of what I think because he's all knowing, so he knows what I'm thinking all the time. So like,
Well, lots of
and
religious people they describe a positive experience with their beliefs.
many do. I agree, but there are a few that don't. Primarily like if you're especially like more like liberal, if you're religious, like lots of like LGBT people that grew up religious and they have to feel like they can't be who they are. And I've even seen certain women that they've read the Bible and they take it literally. And like I've seen them, they go out of their way to say, "Hey, the Bible says women cannot teach. Women are beneath man, so we have no right to do this." She's there a woman, like literally like in support of them being treated less than man because that's what God says. And I think that's pretty messed up. That's like a black man saying, "Hey, the Bible says support slavery. We should be slaves."
My point exactly. We can complain about them all day long. Do you really want to continue that? Like,
Well, I only complain about them when I'm talking to other atheists. When I'm talking to them, I give them arguments.
okay, fine. Then arguing with them. You know, you said that it's kind of an excuse that we can easily resort to by saying decisions are made based on beliefs. So if the beliefs are more accurate, the decisions are gonna be spot on, right?
Not necessarily.
Well, okay, true. It's gonna be closer to that.
Well, I mean that was along the lines that I was, sort of advocating.
It was a long what?
Well, I guess AA didn't really like the characterization, but I think it's pretty accurate to what I was saying.
Kind of that. You know, it's an excuse we can easily give. How is it? How true is it really? Like, what effect do we really have? Not much. And usually, if you can convince a person, then he was probably on his way out of religion already.
I don't agree.
I
'Cause
actually
see
think
online.
there's
I see
been-
online a lot of people. They're like diehard Christians and all that, and they reach out like, "Hey, Aaron Ra. Hey, T Jump. Hey, Vice Rhino. All these guys, Reddit, Twitter, everywhere. They're like, hey, I've been a hardcore Christian, Muslim, etc. for years, and I used to hate you. But I just realized now, from your point, this one video you made, like, really got me questioning it, and I've been thinking about it for some time, and I'm falling out, and I'm an atheist, and I'm living a much better life now, much more free. I don't feel constrained, and so I think there is a point, even if it's only 1 in 100 people you could convince to turn. It's one more person.
You know,
that you
one
can
in
turn
100
and none.
people. We were just talking about how Abrahamic religions are like 57%, about 57% of the world's population. So, 1/100th that is gonna be 0.5%. But if you take the entire world into account, it's still millions of people.
But it's still one more than none.
I mean, I actually think significant success has been made. Since my barometer isn't going to be, or achieved rather, because my barometer isn't going to be how many people am I convincing, to give up religion every day, right? My barometer is sort of intellectual progress that humanity has made over the centuries, with values and notions and concepts that are roughly aligned with mine. And I take good examples of that to be the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, right? Which have gone a long way to free people from their sort of baseless doctrines.
I see.
Another thing they say is if you stop believing in like a god, you'll eventually end up in communism because all the
Oh no, yeah, they say that about nihilism too, which is stupid.
right.
Then we better start believing in God right now.
I mean, I'm happy to concede them that, but that's a good thing.
Listen, if you talk about they say that about communism, which I don't care about, but what bothers me more is what's actually more common. Most people, I think, believe that to some extent. The idea that if you get out of religion, then you'll just be a nihilist. Well, no, okay. It's not that most people believe that. Most people connect with the logic. How many people believe that? I don't know. Many, most of which are religious. So it's they might have this fear of, oh, if I become an atheist, then I'm gonna be a nihilist. They don't know of existentialism and absurdism. They don't know of other philosophy.
I mean, there's a way in which I'm happy to concede that to them and say that's a good thing, right? So, I think there's a lot of merit to Nietzsche's treatment of nihilism, where he treats it as you sort of tear down your sort of established scaffolding of beliefs that was based on nothing anyway, and you sort of reconstruct things according to principles that are more well founded. So in that way, it's it's not some position. Nihilism isn't some sort of permanent worldview to establish for yourself. It's sort of like a stage in the development of your thought, right?
Makes
I don't
sense.
think that argument works out, because I think you could just as easily argue that the theists are the real nihilists, and that's why they embrace the doctrine.
In what sense are they not?
Well, it's kind of like life means nothing, therefore let's LARP as though we're important in theological history.
Let's
I don't
love
think that's what they
we're
believe.
important. I like your description.
That might be sort of one interpretation of what they're actually doing, right? I mean, it's not one that I share, but I also don't think that that's going to be they're not going to consider that a faithful representation of what they believe, right?
Yeah, because they don't think it's LARPing. They think it's the real deal.
Right.
Well, they wouldn't have to agree. It would be a response to their claim that atheism brings forth nihilism.
Well, I mean, it's just kind of asserting your own view of what they're doing against their view of what they're doing. Which I mean, I guess a lot of the time in these conversations, people just kind of, assert things at each other like, oh, if you're an atheist, life is meaningless. Or, oh, well, actually, if you're a theist, life is meaningless. I mean, we could kind of do that, trade assertions, but it doesn't really go anywhere, I guess.
I don't know what the meaning of life even is. It's kind of this feeling, the meaning of life becomes a problem when you have clinical depression. That's when I think it becomes a problem. Because when you develop a suicidal tendency, then you start actually considering whether or not life is meaningful. Seriously. Beyond that, I don't see any reason to even think about it.
If you want to know the meaning of life, I could direct you to the dictionary, where I could read you the meaning.
That's not going to be necessary.
I sort of find the notion of meaning of life to be sort of spurious. Like, I understand meaning is like a linguistic thing, Meaning is like, what my statements carry if they're crafted in the right way.
I think that
Yeah, don't you think it
need
begs the question that life has
Well, but
I don't really...
when people say like meaning of life, it sounds like what they mean is like, what's my purpose? But they'll also say things like purpose and meaning, as if meaning is something distinct. So then I don't know what it's supposed to be in that context.
Let's just say purpose. All right, say purpose. They're basically asking me, why should I live? Why not die? Even people who listen, people don't really work that way. A person that asks that question and doesn't find an answer usually is not gonna kill themselves. It's not gonna happen usually. It's only a problem if you're depressed. It's only a problem if you have a problem.
Or if you're a theist who clings to religion for purpose.
The Meaning of Life is a Monty Python movie.
Yes.
Mhm.
I was waiting for someone to say it.
Monty Python.
There's also the Book of Life if you want to read about it.
I believe